All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. First thing and foremost, I want to give all praises, all honor, and all glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach. Secondly, I want to give double honors to my elders and my apostles of Great Millstone, who taught me this truth in righteousness and in sincerity. And third of all, I want to give salutations to the hopeful elect that are out on the highways and the byways teaching and preaching His word in truth and in sincerity. Now, as you saw that video clip in the beginning of this lesson, we have uproars of the people brewing. You know, it has fully manifested. And one of the leading causes of this uproar that we're currently seeing is the persecution of the Northern Kingdom mainly, which is you so-called Hispanics, you know, you so-called Native Americans, regarding ICE coming and without question grabbing you so-called Hispanics, you know, so-called Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, you know, Venezuelans, just grabbing y'all up and just deporting y'all or delivering y'all to concentration camps where no one knows where you are, no one knows what's going on regarding your well-being. There's been multiple reports coming out about the inhumane circumstances of these different holding camps, these different detention centers that these immigrants are being held within. You know, so these things are being made known to the public, and even bigger than the hidden things being made known to the public, you actually got videos of ICE grabbing people up aggressively, actually doing things themselves that actually being in the wrong in situations, but using the force and the immunity that they have been given to enforce their will and still grab you up, even though they wronged you. Like that situation where the ICE agents ended up causing that Hispanic-looking woman to crash into their car, and they got out of the car and grabbed her up. These things are being shown to everybody because it's on social media, right along with these killings. You got these 2 killings that we've heard about in Minneapolis, and that's one of the main reasons why these protests are happening. As you can see in this picture right here, you have thousands, thousands of people on the streets in below temperatures, freezing temperatures, showing that this is not just your average protest. The Lord is turning up the spirits of these people, and this is all prophecy, because the end is near. Thus saith the scriptures. So, not to be too long-winded, I'm gonna start reading this script. I'm gonna start reading this. What is this article? Salakia. I'm gonna start reading this article, and then I'm gonna get into some scriptures, Lord willing, as well, and expound through the Spirit. So it reads: demonstrators flood Minneapolis streets as hundreds of businesses close to protest ICE. Thousands of protesters shut down streets throughout Minneapolis Street, paused to demand that federal immigration agents end their week-long crackdown. Businesses closed in solidarity, and that's going into agreement, them agreeing with what's going on and actually coming out to protest as well. So, as you can see in this picture, you got thousands out here with all kinds of signs, chanting all kinds of things against ICE. So it says down here, thousands of protesters shut down parts of Minneapolis Street. Paul on Friday as hundreds of businesses closed their doors and workers and students stayed home to demand an end to the sweeping immigration crackdown that has roiled the Twin Cities for weeks. And when you go into this word right here, roiled, the second definition makes someone annoyed or irritated. Right. These people are very annoyed and very irritated because they're seeing live in front of their faces or on social media people being mishandled, people being beaten, people being murdered, people being snatched up, children being snatched up by ICE. No questions asked, no identification. You can't prove yourself when it comes to them pulling up on you. They don't care about you showing your identification. They just shoot first, ask questions later. When it comes to the literal sense and when it comes to just grabbing you up, they're going to treat you like an illegal before they know that you are legal or not. So it says the action on Friday, which unfolded in sub-zero temperatures, right? Sub-zero temperatures. So it was very cold when this happened. The protest, showing that these people are fed up. It says, was the most widespread and organized demonstration since federal agents arrived in Minneapolis more than 6 weeks ago. It was aimed at pressuring the federal government to pull thousands of its agents from the streets. Right, so you got the citizens rising up and pretty much beginning, the spirit is being put on them to take things into their own hands, take matters into their own hands. Now, we've seen protests in the past, and this is, more of a peaceful protest right here. You just walking and chanting. We've seen protests like this, but you have a whole nother community that are not on this, vibrating on this vibration. They don't want to walk and hold signs. They don't want to chant anymore. They want to pick up their guns and they want to eliminate ICE themselves. You have a lot of different people on social media calling for unification of the American people, so to speak, in order to come together against ICE with weapons, with aggression, not with peaceful protests, not with peaceful words, not with music and dancing. So you have a split happening, and that's going to get to the Egyptian against Egyptian, because this is spiritual Egypt, which the actual, Egypt that we were in Deuteronomy, Exodus. When it comes to that Egypt, that was the land of our captivity as the Hebrew Israelites, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. So the name and the place Egypt, it is symbolic to a house of bondage, the land of our captivity, a place where we literally built up and we were in slavery. We built this place up and we are slaves here. So it's spiritually Egypt, and I'm going to go into that, Lord willing. But it says businesses, many of them locally owned, closed their doors to halt economic activity, saying that losing a day's revenue was worth the cost to be part of the effort to end the immigration enforcement. So you got businesses shutting their doors and coming out on the streets. Everybody want to make their money, but on this here day, they said, forget the money. We are going to protest. We are going to speak our piece. We are going to rise up and call for action, call for ICE to be taken off of the streets. This is serious, because it's the Lord's doing. It's not just some random protest. This is only going to get worse. ICE is only going to do more. the attacks, the actual tactics that ICE is using, it's only getting worse as the people buck up more, as the people push back more and fight against ICE more. We're seeing the water hose being brought back out, people being sprayed with water hoses, people being sprayed with mace, ICE using paintball guns, ICE using deadly weapons like guns, and without warning, shooting to kill, even when you are not a threat. And we know that these things are orchestrated. A lot of them especially are orchestrated, by the so-called white man, Esau, Edom, to stir up the people. Because what this devil ultimately wants is for the people to rise up and try to take things into their own hands by causing harm to these ICE agents so that, as Trump is saying, he can deploy the Insurrection Act, deploy troops, deploy martial law, and truly lock down these cities. So it says there's a time to stand up for things, and this is it, said Allison Kerwin, the owner of Al's Breakfast, a Minneapolis restaurant that closed on Friday. If it takes away from a day of our income, it's worthwhile. That is worthwhile, right? So you got people not caring about losing out on a little money because ultimately they're fed up. It says the day of protest follow weeks of clashes between Minnesotans and federal agents, mostly in the Minneapolis and St. Paul areas. The immigration operation, which started late last year, has led to some 3,000 arrests, at least 2 shootings in Minneapolis, and chaotic scenes on the streets. Right, going into the water hose, people being hosed down, people being, grabbed up and, snatched up by ICE, people being pepper sprayed, people being thrown to the ground, children being taken, all of these things happening. And as it says, 3,000 arrests, shootings, at least 2. We got the good one, the good situation, and that doctor that recently just got gunned down, So it says, calls for the ouster of federal agents have grown from residents and local officials. Right, and the ouster is going into defunding, the dismissal, the, getting rid of ICE. That's what that's going into. So it says calls for the ouster of federal agents have grown from residents and local officials, especially after a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent fatally shot Reneen Good, an American citizen in Minneapolis, on January 7th. Right, so these things are, these events, like this Reneen Good situation, they are ultimately causing these people to lose it, to say, to hell with just sitting around. We have to do something. And like I was saying, you got a group of individuals that want to, rise up and, like these people are right here, walk in the streets and protest, and speak their piece and say what they want to be done. But you have another group of people that have guns in their hands, that have vests on, that want to go and force ICE to stop through violence, not through words. Just as ICE isn't using words, you have a group of people that also are no longer wanting to use words, but are wanting to use the sword. So it says, let's go down here. The largest of the protests on Friday descended on downtown Minneapolis from late afternoon into the early evening as thousands marched to the Target Center and home area of the state's 2 professional basketball teams protesters carried signs and chanted over and over for ICE to leave the city. Now I asked ChatGPT what was some of the things being chanted, and as you can see down here, it says ICE out. They were chanting ICE out, a call to remove ICE from the city and state, abolish ICE, demanding the elimination of the agency, no justice, no peace, get ICE off our streets, linking demands for justice with the removal of ICE. Right, so they want these ICE agents to be prosecuted, they want them to be detained, they want them to face the judgment that they are, giving. They want them to feel the pain that they are inflicting. They want them to be abolished, for ICE no longer to be a thing, for them no longer to be funded. They want ICE out of their city and their state, to be gone. But the thing about that is, this is ultimately not going to solve anything, because this is the Spirit of the Lord. And even if Trump was to, die down ICE in Minneapolis for a little bit, it's ultimately not going to last. It's going to get worse. These attacks, these strategies that are being used to afflict these people is going to continue to get worse, because the boiling pot can only get hotter. We are in the last days, So when it comes down to the uproars that we're seeing, there's nothing that these people can do through rising up to truly stop the pressure that is being applied to them, because this is ultimately being done to cause these people to rise up with their weapons. These chants are not going to stop anything. Those ICE out, abolish ICE, no justice, no peace, standing out in the streets, that's not going to stop anything. And as we're seeing people being hosed down, people being pepper sprayed, people being shot with paintball guns and flashbangs being thrown, tear gas being thrown, as we're seeing these things happening, it's a clear sign that they have to do more. They have to do more to get what they want, so to speak, which is truly war, because these people they're not actually even wanting peace, because these people don't know peace. They truly want war. So that's what they're gonna get, civil war. They're gonna get war, and that's what the scripture says. But it says those in the crowded cities, those in the crowd cited different indignities that drove them to the streets. Missed goods, killing, the aggressive tactics developed by federal agents against demonstrators. Right. Some of those examples I was just listing. They're continuing to increase in their tactics, to fight off against these protesters and these demonstrators. So these people are only going to get more angry. It's only so much pepper spraying, so much snatching up, so much paintball gun shooting, and just unjust tactics that's going to be used against these people before they begin to use deadly force against these agents. It says the viral image of a 5-year-old boy detained by ICE alongside his father. Right, so that was another thing. You got a lot of these people, they're done with this place. They're done with the authority of Esau Edom, the so-called white man, which President Trump is the king right now, and they're done with him. They want no more of they want to hear no more of what he has to say. They want no more of his ruling ways. So they are the spirit within them is brewing to take these people down by force, to act on their own. It says, I got emotional, said Butchery Austin, and found a founder of Brass Solidarity, a racial justice activist street band. As he looked at the crowd of thousands, there's a resistance on a level of fight, but it's a fight stemming from love for our neighbors, and that love is only going to last so long because these people are not unified. They're all over the place. Some people want to kill ICE with their weapons. Some people just want to cause ICE to stop by preaching love and making them realize what they're doing. Some people want to cause Trump to, abolish ICE, or the government to, drive ICE out. Some people want the police to fight against ICE. And some people are down with ICE. They want ICE to continue to do, they want ICE to continue doing what they're doing. So you have these people that mentally, when it comes to what their foundation is, what they standing on, what they believe in, what their morals and hopes for this place is, you have them separated, divided. Even though they are all out there right now protesting, they are all divided because they're not unified under one power, under one mind. That's the power of this truth and being, unified in Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, because we all have the same goal, which is to be saved from this place, and delivered from the ways, the hopes, the dreams, and the cares of this place. But these people, they don't have the Lord. They don't know the Lord. Neither do they care to know the Lord. Therefore, it's going to show. So it says, Mr. Austin said the group, which formed after the murder of George Floyd in 2020, came out to the Target Center on Friday afternoon because they have seen how music can bring resistance and joy and a message of hope and change. Right, so you got some of the same people that was out there for George Floyd out here right now. So you got all of these different energies, all of these different emotions being put into one space. These people are remembering what did happen in the past and what's happening right now, and it's causing these people to boil inside. So I'm gonna grab some scriptures right fast, because as we're seeing, this is prophecy. Thus saith the scriptures, thus saith the Lord. Now this is 2nd Ezra chapter 9 and verse 1. It reads, He answered me then and said, Measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou seest part of the signs pass, which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. Right. It says, measure thou the time diligently in itself in verse 1. How do we do that? By measuring the prophecies that we are seeing play out on the earth. By going to the scriptures and reading them and actually being able to put two and two together and see that what was spoken in the scriptures is happening right now, and actually being able to understand why they are happening and what the Lord said it means. So it says in verse 1, when thou seest part of the signs pass, which I have told thee before. Right, we're seeing these signs coming to pass. Some of those prophecies I'm going to read, which are in some of these lower verses. But it says, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. And the Lord is visiting this place right now, kindling that fire, causing these people to grow angry, to grow restless, to grow terrified, to grow insane, for the love to be lost among brothers, among sisters, among neighbors, because everybody got a different goal in their heart. Nobody is truly unified. Nobody truly trusts each other, because we've been shown time and time again the betrayal of these people. Nobody truly stands 10 toes down until the end, because they don't have Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. They're not rooted in truth. They are of this world, and this world is wicked. This world is deceptive. This world is full of lies. It's built off of lies. So that's what these people are made up of. They're made up of deception, of lies, all manners of wickedness. That's why it's not going to last, that whole peaceful protest, that whole love, and let's just preach, let's just, walk and give our city no peace until we get justice. Let's chant for ICE to be eliminated, for them to be defunded, for them to be abolished. That's only going to last so long before these people decide, no, we have to do it ourselves. We have to eliminate them. And you already have a very big group of people that have that spirit on them, that are moving with that mentality. It says in verse 3, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes, which we are seeing all over the earth, if you just go into some research on that, there are very, very frequent earthquakes happening all throughout the earth. It says, and uproars of the people in the world. Right, uproars of the people. That's what we are seeing. That's what that is. The protesting, people roaring up, roaring up, raising their voices in the streets, raising their weapons, and calling for others to do the same so that they can fight against ICE, so that they can fight against their government, their king, their ruler, Trump, because he is enforcing ICE, but they're going against it. So they're rising up against their king. It says in verse 4, then shalt thou well understand. Right, so the uproars of the people, that's one of the signs that verse 1 is speaking about, when it says, and when thou seest part of the signs past which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. Those, in verse 3, it says uproars of the people in the world. That is one of those signs. And that's one of the things that we measure diligently in itself, as it says in verse 1. When we go into the different protests that's happening, which this is one of the main ones happening right now, we are able to put two and two together and realize that this is the Lord showing that he is near. The end is near. It says in verse 4, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. Right, because this book of 2nd Esdras was written, back in the ancient times. It wasn't written 20 years ago. It wasn't written 30 years ago. So when it comes down to it, this is prophecy, because these scriptures were written before this even happened. But this is speaking about exactly what we are seeing. It says in verse 5, for like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. Right. So you had the beginning of this place when everything was more peaches and cream. Society was more, it was more in a stable state. People abided by the laws. People actually laughed and talked and were social. But as time has gone on, people have grown more anxious. People have grown more less social. People have grown more angry when it comes to their neighbors. You don't see people outside having block parties as much anymore. All of these things are diminishing because the love of this place is diminishing. And that's the signs of the end being manifest, which, as verse 3 says, the uproars of the people, the uproars of the people in the world. That is one of those signs that verse 5 speaks about. It says, for like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. Right. So the end is being made manifest through these prophecies, through the uproars of the people. So it says in verse 6, even so the times also of the highest have plain beginnings and wonder and powerful works and endings in effects and signs. Right. So these are the signs and the effects of the prophecies, when it comes to us being in this captivity and ruled over by a cruel Lord. That is ultimately one of the signs, one of the effects, because the effect of us being under this cruel Lord, as the scriptures say we would be under, is him being brutal with us, dealing unjustly with us, snatching our people up, pepper spraying us, beating our people down in the streets, throwing flashbangs. I'm speaking about what's happening right now in Minneapolis. And it's not even just Israelites. You got Esau out there, you got the other nations out there. So everybody getting it. It says in verse 7, and every one that shall be saved and shall be able to escape by his works and by faith whereby ye have believed. Right. So the faith goes hand in hand with the works, because the faith is what produces the works. And the only ones who are going to have that faith in the Lord, which is going to produce, good works, faithful works to serve the Lord, is the elect. That small number of the children of Israel only that have been chosen, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, that have been chosen to believe in the Lord and to serve him over this world, and to understand what's happening, and to trust in the Lord through it all, because it says in verse 8, shall be preserved from the said perils and shall see my salvation in my land. Right. So the perils that we're seeing out on the streets, ICE running up in houses, waiting outside of the jails, and snatching up people and deporting them, people being gunned down by ICE. The elect, they are going to be preserved from these things, and the standard is going to be lifted. Spiritual power. The Lord is not going to leave us out here defenseless, because without the Lord, we are defenseless. We see that we are undermatched when it comes to the physical aspect. We don't have the weapons that they have. We don't have the technology that they have. We don't have the surveillance that they have. So we need spiritual intervention, divine intervention. So it says continuing on in verse 8, and within my borders, right? So we're going to see that salvation. As it gets worse and worse, we're going to see the Lord delivering the men of the Lord. Our brothers, Lord willing, we are at that number. We're going to see ourselves being delivered from situations. We're going to see fellow brothers that believe in the Lord being delivered from situations, being used to deliver us from situations through the Lord. It says, and within my borders, for I have sanctified them for me from the beginning. Right. So separated them. The elect have been separated. That's why they're not going to be out on those streets. They're not going to be protesting. We're not seeing them protesting right now. They're going to keep on preaching this word up until the Lord shuts their mouth. And ultimately, when that happens, all mercy, All grace is going to go out the window, and it's going to be fully time for judgment, for the warnings to be ended and for the judgments to be inflicted. It says, then in verse 9, then shall they be in pitiful case which have abused my ways, and they that have cast them away despitefully shall dwell in torments. And that's what we're seeing. You so-called Hispanics being grabbed up. A lot of these people have heard the scriptures. They have heard the warnings. They have heard the men of the Lord preaching this truth. They've walked past camps. They've spoken against the truth. Or they've heard of it and they've decided to continue living their own lives in this world and continuing to trust in the so-called white man, which is their enemy. So they are dwelling in torments, being deported, being pepper sprayed, being sprayed in the streets, being, snatched up and delivered into different detention centers and concentration camps where who knows what's happening to them. These are some of the torments, But I'm gonna grab Isaiah 19 and verse 1. It reads, the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt. And that cloud is going into the Lord Yahushai's chariot, which is not a UFO. It's the vehicle of the angels. Those so-called UFOs that we see, those are the vehicles of the angels. And Yahushai, he has the fathership. That's that swift cloud. It says, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. Right. So all of the knowledge, all of the cares, all of the religions, all of the entertainment, all of the celebrities, everything here is going to be made nothing when Yahushai appears in the clouds, to save his chosen. That's going to be, as second Ezra chapter 9 said, that's going to be saved from those perils that have been spoken of. Yahushai, he's going to come in that chariot to deliver them and to destroy everybody that trusted in this place, to ultimately inflict that second death, right along with the nuclear bombs that's going to drop on this place and completely destroy it. It says in verse 2, and the Egyptians against the and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. Right. Now, when you go into Egypt, as I was speaking of earlier, we were enslaved in Egypt, and we were made to build up all of the, temples, all of the pyramids, everything there. We were the ones that were used to make the place beautiful, to make it one of the most glorious kingdoms in that time. We are the only reason why Egypt became so great. And it's the same thing here when it comes to culture, the music, the buildings, all of the things here we built, under bondage. At one point we was literally in chains, enslaved, but now we are under spiritual chains. It's more spiritual than it is physical now. And that's why a lot of people believe that we are free when we are still in captivity, because we can't do what we want to do. We can't just leave this country. We can't just, go hunting and do what we want to do here. We gotta pay for food and fruits and vegetables and pay to drink water when all of those things should be free. We're still in captivity. But to grab the point that this is spiritually Egypt, this is Revelation 11 and 8. It reads, and their dead bodies, right, that there is going into the children of Israel. You so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And the dead bodies is going into being spiritually dead, because the majority of our people are dead because they don't have Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, which is life. Through knowing the Lord, through the Lord being with you and supping with you and giving you the Holy Spirit, giving you the understanding, the full understanding, the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of this truth. Through those things, we gain life through being baptized and, having the understanding of the word, knowing this truth. Through those things, we come back to life. But without those things, we are dead, because we believe we're Hispanics, Mexicans, blacks, African Americans, Jamaicans, Haitians, when we are not those things. We're not Cubans, we're not Colombians, we're not Guatemalans, Argentinians and Chileans, we're not Puerto Ricans, we're none of those things. We are the children of Israel, So it says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is America, That is the great city when it comes to all of these, because this is a city, This is not a country, This is a city, truly, So it says, of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. Right. Spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. So it's spiritually Sodom because in Sodom and Gomorrah, it was, you already know what was happening there. Man on man, woman on woman, everybody tasting the rainbow. What do we see here? Look at Georgia. You got Pride Month, you got all of these things. This is spiritually Sodom and Egypt, because Egypt was the house of bondage, the place where we were made captives, made slaves, and we had to build up everything, given no credit. You had the people that was ruling over us, knowing that we were greater than them, more powerful, smarter, more physically talented and gifted, more mentally capable, and they decided to oppress us more and to make it harder for us because they knew that we had those advantages. That's the same thing that happened here. It says where also the Lord was crucified, right? They put to death the image of the true Lord and Savior, Yahweh Shai. They call him Jesus Christ. They call him Yeshua. They call him these different names that are not his true name. They changed how he looked. They made him look white with long brown stringy hair and blue eyes, when the scriptures say that he has very dark skin that looks like it burned in the furnace, with red eyes, with white woolly hair, with a very deep voice that sounds like many waters. It says the Lord's skin was like unto fine brass that was burned in the fire, in the furnace. If you burn a grain of rice or anything in a furnace, it's going to come out black. So they crucified, which means like put to death. They destroyed the image of our Lord in this place. So this is spiritually Sodom and Egypt, and that's why this Isaiah 19 is relevant, and why it's symbolic, and why it is speaking about this here place that we are living in, which is America. It says in verse 2, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, which is going into the civilians, the Babylonians, the Americans. These Americans are going against each other. You have, like I was speaking about, you have some that want to peacefully protest, that don't want violence, and you want some that do not want to peacefully protest and that want nothing but violence. Those people are against each other. And you are only going to see that be made more evident as the people who do want violence make themselves more known. You have videos of people being followed on the roads by civilians that's claiming that they're ICE when they're not. You got people that's wanting ICE to continue to do what they're doing. you know? So these people are clashing, and it's only going to grow worse because the attacks, you know, the tactics that ICE is using, and the troops, the numbers are going to get worse and worse, you know? So it's only going to cause these people to feel that they have to do more than just walk around and protest. And these people are ultimately going to rise up against each other, because all manners of plagues are going to be hitting this place. You know, you got power outages, you got food shortages, you know, you got all of these different things that are going to cause these people to not only rise up against the government and ICE, but to rise up against each other. You know, it says, and I will set Egyptians against Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. You got some of these cities, or, you know, if you want to call them states, you know, that's more so with ICE, you know, that's going to be more down with allowing ICE to do what they're doing. And you got some that's not. You know, you got the governor of in the government of Minneapolis not wanting ICE to continue doing what they're doing, you know, but Trump is enforcing ICE to do what they're doing, you know, so it's complete division. In verse 3 it says, and the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof. Right, the spirit of this place, the love, the joy, the happiness, the hopes of future, you know, the dreams and aspirations, all of these things are failing because these people are seeing that ultimately a lockdown, you know, a complete stripping of their control, of their freedom is coming, you know, that they won't be able to just go to the store and walk around late at night and do what they want to do anymore, you know. So these things are causing them to, the spirit of this place to fail, you know, for these people to lose the joy of this place. That's why the holidays not hitting the same, the TV shows not hitting the same, the music not hitting the same, the food not tasting the same. You know, the prices of everything is rising, gas prices rising, vacations don't, you know, vacate your pain and your suffering no more. You know, you still be stressed out. It says, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. Right, so they're going to be going and seeking all manners of relief, you know, all manners of deliverance, trying to group together, you know, and fight against ICE, and fight against these troops that are going to be deployed. Martial law, you know, which ICE is just a preview to martial law. You know, you're going to have these cities locked down. You're not going to be able to go from city to city, which the scriptures tell us about, you know. So these people, they're going to be seeking their religions, calling on Allah, calling on Jesus Christ. You know, they're going to be trying to band together. You know, they're going to be trying to do all manners of things in order to overcome the pressure that's being applied to them. But it's not going to work. You know, it's going to fail, just like the spirit of this place. And this is verse 4 right here, and I'm gonna end it off right here. It says, and the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahawashi of hosts. Right. Who is that cruel Lord, that fierce king? We see who that is. DJ Trump. Fiercely, cruelly speaking against those who have been murdered out in the streets, even though we clearly see that the things that they're saying are not true when it comes to the footage that we see. You know, saying that, you know, that doctor that got shot down was a terrorist, when he was literally a doctor, and he didn't do anything to provoke him being killed in that footage. And he was actually stripped of his weapon, which was in the holster of his waist right before he was shot. So it was no threat. You got the good situation. You know, she was shot when the police, you know, the police force, they would have just hopped in the car and chased after her. You know, they wouldn't have shot her dead like that. So these people are moving in more of a fierce spirit, in more of a cruel spirit, because the fierce and cruel Lord is commanding them to, you know. And it says at the beginning of verse 4, and the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord. So these people are being given over into the hand of this cruel Lord. They're not going to be able to overcome, you know. Even though there's going to be civil wars, there's going to be uprisings of the people, you know, there's going to be death on both sides, you know, when it comes to the federal agents, when it comes to the civilians, federal agents killing each other, civilians killing each other, you know, and all of these things is ultimately still going to lead to them being controlled by this cruel Lord, being ruled over by this cruel Lord in the MOCB, which is the micro C-hip, you know, that digital implant being enforced, you know, and them being forced to receive it or to be rejected, you know, to be taken into a concentration camp. We already seeing that they're forcing people to prove their identity. Trump is allowing them to go door to door, you know, for people to have to prove their identity. That MOTB is going to be a complete identification C-hip. So without that, we can't prove that you're an American citizen, that you're not a terrorist. So we have to take you. We have to do whatever we say that we have to do to you, you know, which is treat you like an outsider, treat you like a terrorist, a foreigner, you know. But if you get that MOTB, you are forsaking the Lord and you will be punished. You will be destroyed. So that fierce king, that cruel Lord, you know, that is ultimately going into this president that is ruling right now. And these people they have been given over into his hand because they trusted in this place. You know, they trusted in the lies that he said he was gonna do. You know, the things that he told him he would do. You know, you got you so-called Mexicans, y'all fully trusted in him. You know, helping him on his campaign. Now look at what he did. So these people are being given over into his hand, starting with the children of Israel, starting with the house of Israel, because we are the Lord's. So we are the first ones to feel that belt. You know, we were given the law, statutes, and commandments. We were told not to have another God before the Lord, not to trust our enemies. But our people did that, and they continue to do that. So they are being given over into his hands, ultimately for the Lord to be like, to tell them, this is what you trusted. This is what you trusted in. This is who you trusted over me. So I'm going to let him have you and have his way with you. But, you know, that was the point of this lesson. And I hope I was able to bring it out clearly and edify you brothers and you sisters. You know, as we see, it's only getting hotter. It's only gonna get worse because it's prophecy. It's bigger than the physical. It's spiritual. And the Lord said this was gonna happen. And you have been warned, speaking to myself firstly. So repent, because the kingdom of heaven is at hand and Yahweh Shai is soon to come. And as we see, he's even at the doors because these prophecies are boiling. So shalom.
Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord! To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. As if a man did flee from a lion, and a bear met him, or went into the house, and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark, and no brightness in it? Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord! To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light, as if a man did flee from a lion, and a bear met him, or went into the house, and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark, and no brightness in it? Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord! To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light, as if a man did flee from a lion, and a bear met him, or went into the house, and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark, and no brightness in it? Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows, and woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Then it shall come to pass that the sword which ye feared shall overtake you there in the land of Egypt, and the famine, whereof ye were afraid, shall follow close after you there in Egypt, and there ye shall die. So shall it be with all the men that set their faces to go into Egypt to sojourn there. They shall die by the sword, by the famine, and by the pestilence, and none of them shall remain or escape from the evil that I will bring upon them. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, and pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord! To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light, as if a man did flee from a lion, and a bear met him, or went into the house, and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark, and no brightness in it? And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book.